It's time to step into the Coming Out Lounge, a cool, safe space to be true to your sexual self. With your host, Rick Clemens. Rick has helped hundreds of people come out of the closet, and now each week he's bringing you cool insights for loving and accepting yourself, boosting your self-confidence, and living a guilt-free, purpose-filled life on the other side of the closet doors. Cuddle up with yourself and get ready for heartwarming coming out stories, ideas for living authentically, and tips for being fully self-expressed. Now here's your host, Coming Out Coach Rick.
Hey, closet dwellers and closet busters. It's me, Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach, that guy that, I try to help you simplify the chaos in your life to make those big, bold moves you're going to make. And, it's Pride Month. I can't believe it. We're actually in Pride Month. Pride celebrations are starting to happen all over the country. Some have already happened. Some will happen later in the year. But because it is Pride Month, we are celebrating by doing double interview shows all month long each week. That means on Wednesdays and Fridays, you are going to be getting interviews with me and my guests about anything and everything related to gay, lesbian, trans life, bisexual, or anybody coming out of a closet in their life. And today, I really want to talk about our trans brothers and sisters, because it's more than just trans this or trans that. It is a life transformation, and it is about their life. And there's so much talk these days about the trans community, having transgender people, transsexuals, trans bathrooms, and all this sort of stuff. It just seems like all we're hearing is trans. And sometimes I just want to go, what the fuck is all the hubbub? They're just people. And to help us really understand that, I brought someone in that I met through another friend, and her name is Addison Rose, advocate for Pride United. Her pronouns are they, them. And even though I said her, I want to kind of help you guys start to begin to twist your heads into this. It doesn't have to be a label. It's just who this person is. And she's coming to us from a beautiful organization called Pride United, and she's going to talk about what they're doing to support the LGBTQIA people in our communities, the survivors of violence, so on and so forth. And we're just going to have a real, hopefully stimulating conversation around all these things, because if nothing else during Pride Month, I would really like to shine some spotlights on what does it mean to be gender fluid? What does it mean to be transgender, transsexual, all these different things. So now it's time for me to shut up and say, welcome to the show, Addison Rose. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's an honor to join you for this conversation, for sure.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with a little bit of your story? You're 24 years old. You consider yourself trans, feminine, gender queer. And for those that may just beginning to kind of wrap their head around these new terminologies, why don't you give us a little insight of what that means for you and how you see yourself showing up in the world under labels, which none of us really like to use. But I'd love to hear your perspective on who you are under those labels.
Absolutely. So I do consider myself a transgender person and under the trans umbrella. And for those who are listening, I think that to know that transgender just means that you don't identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth. So some people are assigned boy at birth, some people are assigned girl at birth. And, if they grow up into that same gender identity their entire life, then that's fine. They're cisgender. But if you don't identify with that gender, then you are on the trans spectrum. So I'm one of those people who just doesn't like the gender or identify with the gender that I was assigned at birth. For me, on my transness, I don't see myself really as a man or woman either. I see myself somewhere in between, somewhere outside of that binary of man and woman. I see myself having both men and women qualities in myself. So that's where my gender queerness kind of comes from. It's a very vague, confusing, but beautiful identity. And also, in addition to that gender queerness, I'm trans feminine. So for me, that means that I don't possess necessarily a woman identity, but I feel that I'm just feminine at my core. And so that comes through with my gender and my expression. And so I like to wear makeup and have long hair and wear dresses if I want to, or jumpsuits. For me, that is what my femininity looks like, and that's how I express it. But if I were to visualize my femininity, it looks like a magenta or pink kind of glow in the middle of my chest, just like shining through. So that's how I visualize my femininity and my trans femininity. But it's been a process for me. Go for it.
No. I love this. And the only reason I'm interrupting is because I think this is we're in new frontiers with this. And it's really hard for people to wrap their head around this, but it's only because we're not open to it. We don't, nothing's difficult to understand unless you make it difficult to understand. And I'm wondering how you have started to help, because I know you do beautiful work in this arena. How do you help people get past that? But I don't get it. I don't understand it. How do you help people start to walk through and gain better understanding of what it is exactly that makes you you?
Absolutely. Well, I think that there's so many different ways to educate. And for me, I think I go back to history. And I show people that being non-binary, being someone who isn't necessarily a man or woman, and also people who are transgender, these identities have been around since the dawn of gender. If you look at so many cultures throughout the world, I'm thinking about like in India in particular, there's the Hijra community, Hijra. And they are a group of quote unquote third gender community members who don't see themselves necessarily as men or women and express themselves predominantly through femininity. And then I think about how in Polynesian cultures and even in indigenous American cultures, there are two-spirit people, and two-spirit people possess both masculine and feminine qualities. And Hijra and two-spirit people have been celebrated and uplifted and respected even in their communities for thousands of years. And it wasn't until, imperialism and colonization that those identities were then seen as dirty or less than or worthless and were stripped of those respectable titles. And now we see trans people all around the world facing stigma and erasure and criminalization just for being trans. So I kind of go through the history approach and show that transness and being non-binary, being genderqueer, being trans feminine, all these titles and identities, they've been around for a long time. It's just new to some people. So I think that when I approach it that way, people go like, oh, I didn't realize that I thought this was new, but right. Realizing
no, it's not new at all.
It's been around for a long time.
Oh yeah. It's been around forever. So for you in your journey, at what age did you really start to realize this was who you were becoming?
Yes. Well, honestly, I started my gender journey, I think, when I was 3 or 4 years old. I would wear my mother's clothing and dress up as Dorothy from Wizard of Oz. I think she was my idol when I was little. And I didn't realize till later in life that Wizard of Oz was an allegory or like a metaphor for coming out of the closet. I didn't realize that.
Right.
Yeah, I loved dressing up in my mom's clothing when I was little. But after that point, my parents, and especially my dad, they were trying to protect me, I think. And so they forced me kind of into more of a rigid, masculine man kind of role growing up.
Right.
And then it wasn't until I came out as gay my freshman year of college, when I was 18 years old, that I felt so free to explore myself even more. So I started my gender journey again then when I was 18, and I got into some drag, and I tried some cross-dressing and tried a little bit of this and started studying more about gender and gender theory. And then at the age of 21, I decided that it was time for me to come out as the next part of myself. So I was already out as gay and then coming out as trans, and then had explained to people that, yes, there is a difference between sexual orientation and gender identity. But yeah, I've been out as trans since I was 21, and now I'm 24, going on 25 in September.
Wow. So let's really start to break this down, because you just kind of dropped some stuff that I'm sure some listeners, not me, because I'm on panels all the time and I really get this. But so you just said, I came out as gay and then I came out as trans. So people have the hardest time with that sort of stuff because they can't seem to separate gender identity and sexual orientation. No matter how many times we explain the difference, sexual orientation is what you're attracted to. Gender identity is what you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is, who do you go to bed with? All that sort of stuff. So let's break this down in the best way that we can. You see yourself, you are trans feminine. So you're really more on the feminine spectrum. As far as a sexual orientation, what I just heard you say is you're gay. So does that mean that you're more attracted to women or more attracted to men? Because I know under the gender queer, some of this I'm actually kind of attracted to both, and that doesn't necessarily make me bisexual. So maybe this would help if you could kind of break it down even more so our listeners could really start to grasp this.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that how you're phrasing it too with, the identity, the idea that, gender is who you go to bed as and sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. I think that's a great kind of way to put it. But for me, in terms of gender, I'm trans feminine, gender queer. For my sexual orientation, though, I don't use the term gay anymore myself, but I use the term androsexual. For me, that means that I'm attracted to masculine people. So that can be men, women, genderqueer people of any gender or sex identity who are just presenting themselves and express themselves through masculinity. So it gets complicated, when I may be attracted to someone who isn't masculine, but I perceive them as masculine. So that's a whole other conversation.
Sure.
But when it comes to sexual orientation, that's just your sexual, physical, possibly even romantic or emotional attraction to people of certain genders, sexes, and orientations and expressions. Right. And my gender is just something that I'm feeling on the inside and might be also expressed on the outside too. So it's two different topics, but I think that people mix up trans with being gay because a lot of people see transgender people not as trans. They see them as cisgender people who are cross-dressing, or cisgender people who are, we see trans people as sexual beings. So therefore we see being trans as a sexual orientation in itself. So I think that as we unlearn the stigma of what trans people are and who we are and what we're trying to do, and realize that we're not sex objects, that we're not fetishes, that we're not just what you see in pornography, that we'll realize that trans is an identity and a gender identity. It is not a sexual orientation. It's just another part of my identities.
Absolutely.
When I break down all of the different orientations and attractions and identities, I kind of break it down into 5 spectrums. So the first one being sex. That's our physical body. It's made up of our chromosomes, our hormones, our genitals. It's the primary and secondary sex characteristics. That's the external and maybe sometimes internal with our hormones, physical part of our body. Our gender is what's between the ears. So sex is between the legs, gender is between the ears. And it might be reflected through our sex, but who knows? But gender really is a social construct and it's more than physical. So sex and gender. Then we have our gender expression. So that's how we wear our clothes, how we act, how we, what hobbies we get into. It's a whole lot of things into how we express who we are to the world and how we want to communicate our genders to those around us. And then on top of that, we have our sexual orientation and romantic orientation. So sexual orientation is the physical, sexual attraction to other people. And the romantic orientation is our emotional, romantic attraction to other people. I know that kind of blows people's minds too, to think that sex and romance can be different, but I'm an example of someone who's attracted sexually to masculine people. But romantically, I can be attracted to people of any gender, any expression, any sex. So like I said, when it gets complicated, when I'm attracted to someone who's not masculine, I don't know whether I should pursue that or not. And can I be someone who can have a relationship with just sex and no romance, or does it need to be both? But going back, there's those 5 spectrums of sex, the physical body, gender was on the inside, expression, how we express ourselves, sexual orientation, the physical attraction, and then romantic orientation, the emotional attraction. That's how I break it down.
I love that. And, I've always used 4 of them, and romantic, I've always kind of put in the sexual orientation, but I know there's a difference there. In fact, I was just working with a client of mine who he was married to a woman, went through a divorce, and the divorce wasn't because he came out of the closet. He just got divorced because it was a mutual thing. And then he's been dating a guy now, and he's working with me because he's like, I'm trying to come out to people, but the most difficult thing I'm having trouble with is really defining to people what I am. And so today I literally said to him, I said, what if you quit trying to label and you just told people I'm on a journey of connection where I'm learning how to connect with people from a romantic and intimate and a sexual space. I said, because you're not saying you're gay or straight. You're just saying this is what your exploration is. You're on this exploration to figure out the connections there. And you just beautifully added, all the other stuff there with it. And if people could just understand, sometimes that's all this is we're just exploring stuff. And it's not going to look like what it looks like in the human sexuality textbook, what we learn. It can be a beautiful spectrum of many, many different things. And I think that's what hangs people up is they think it's got to be black or white. And the thing is between the black or white isn't gray. It's the absence and presence of light that makes all the other beautiful colors of what sex, sexuality, orientation, gender identity, all this stuff makes up. But for so long, we as a society have said it's got to be black and white, even if the black and white means then you're gay or you're bi or you're this, it's become too much. And I think this is why we're seeing so much throwback is people are like, but you're fucking with my black and white mentality. Well, we may be, but you to wake the fuck up on that mentality at this point.
Well, no, I agree. I think that, people are used to their binaries, right? They're used to that being only black and white, or there's only type A or type B personalities, or there's only Republican and Democrat. There's only two options out there for everything. Yep. And that includes sexual orientation and gender too in a lot of people's minds. And I mean, you brought up bisexuality, right? And bisexual people are often told that they need to choose between being straight or gay, that they're being greedy, that they're confused, or that they just can't make up their minds. And the truth is that people who are bisexual, people who are pansexual, people who don't fit into the straight or gay boxes are valid in their identities too. That you don't have to prove yourself either. Just yesterday, I was talking with someone who is pansexual, part of the bisexual spectrum, and is currently dating a man. And, she's dating a man and she's trying to explain to her parents that she is part of this bisexual, pansexual spectrum. And her parents are telling her that she needs to be dating a woman for them to be able to respect her identity, that they can't validate, or they can't see her, or they can't believe her until she starts dating a woman. So it's really upsetting to hear that bisexual people and other people on the queer spectrum are being told that we need to prove ourselves and prove our relationships. And then if we do prove those relationships, then we're stigmatized and maybe thrown out of the house or face other consequences for being with people of the same genders or similar genders. Mm-hmm. So it's really complicated, but it's so important for us to break that binary, and for people to understand that there's so much more than just Republican and Democrat. There's more than type A and type B personalities. There's more, as you were saying, than just black and white. There's a whole color spectrum out there, and it's three-dimensional, it's complicated, it's layered. And once people unlearn their binaries, they'll be able to really grasp non-binary and gender fluidity and sexual fluidity identities, but also start to reflect on themselves too and figure out, wow, if I don't fit into the binary, where am I? And start exploring themselves. I hear the term, when you're talking about exploring, I think about the term questioning, right? Yep. And people who are questioning their identities, still trying to figure things out. But even being questioning is an identity in itself too. You can be figuring things out and not use the term gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, anything like that. And exploring that your entire life, and that being an identity in itself, that being valid, that being a real experience.
But the thing I've found is when people say, you got to pick, that has nothing to do with you. That has everything to do with them. That's the only way that they can process. It's not a bad thing, because this is what we do as humans. We kind of need certain things to happen so that we can figure stuff out. But I get really frustrated in this arena, especially, and I guess because I do so much work with people in this arena, that when somebody gets told, okay, well, tell me what you are, I don't know what I am. Can't you understand that? I'm trying, I am figuring this out. I'm questioning this. I'm exploring this. And if you can't still like me for who I am as your friend or your son or your daughter or whatever, because that's where I am, then you know what? I'm not sure I have room for you. That's just that is the advice sometimes I actually end up giving people, is then maybe you need to not make room for them right now in your life, because you're already in enough questioning about yourself. Now do you have to question, how am I going to be accepted by my people? Maybe this isn't the time to be trying to be accepted. In fact, that client that I was referring to, I've even actually encouraged this client to be okay with, if they can't understand that that's where he is, then move on. And maybe right now isn't the time for them to have to understand that. And if it's not vitally important to you, the person who's exploring or coming out, or whatever label we're going to put on that, for that person to actually understand you, then let it go. That doesn't mean you're letting them go forever. It's just let it go for now because you have bigger things to do, better people to go be with, a tribe to go find, your circle, whatever you want to call it, that's going to be with you and totally get you. So I'm curious, as you do this work, because I know you do a lot of work within the community, obviously some of this stuff where people don't get it leads to some less than happy places. It can lead to violence and domestic violence and, mistreatment to children. So kind of talk about some of the work that you do there at Pride United, working within those groups to really help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, to follow up too about that one person that I was talking about, I ended up talking with the parents too. And we had a fabulous conversation too about acceptance and celebration. And, they definitely brought up those concerns of that they wanted that organization. They wanted those boxes to be neat and tidy. And, you're talking to someone who's a Virgo. So I'm someone who loves organization. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting to talk with them about that and helping them learn that there can be way more boxes out there and that sometimes there aren't any boxes as well. So I was helping them unlearn that, but also reminding them that they need to trust their children. They need to trust each other and that they shouldn't have to feel that they need people to prove their identities to them and that we would never ask them to prove their identities to us either. So it was that mutual, it had to be that trust building. And so we talked and we had a great conversation. But what I do here at Pride United, which is a program of Strength United, here at Pride United, we provide services and support to survivors of sexual violence, domestic violence, and child maltreatment who are also LGBTQIA+. So what I do is I connect my clients who come in to free counseling and other resources in the area, as well as to help them and be with them in person as they go through the interview process with detectives, as they have the exam with their nurses, which can be very invasive and very personal, and also just to sit with them as we're waiting for that paperwork and other things to be asked or for things to be filed. So I do a lot of hand holding. I do a lot of sitting and providing snacks and water and wiping tears, but then also giving them the best resources and referrals that they need. What I'm seeing in my work too is that a lot of LGBTQIA people are experiencing sexual violence, whether that be from other people in our community or from outside. I think that a lot of LGBTQIA people, I'll say lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, are sexualized. We're seen as fetishes. We're seen as objects for experimentation, especially bisexual people and transgender women. And because of those stigmas and media representations and misconceptions of who we are, people think that it's okay to take advantage of us and to do things to us for their own pleasure and their own experimentation. So I see sexual violence happening, but I see it from within our community too, because I think that there's a lack of sexual health education in general. But the sexual education that does happen in schools and to populations is very cisgender, very straight oriented. Yep. So we end up having to learn what sex is. We have to learn what consent is, if we do learn that. And we do have to learn how to respect our own bodies and each other's bodies through porn, through other media representations, or through our first times. And so what ends up happening is if people learn that stuff through porn and through experiences, and maybe those experiences are sexually violent, we then start repeating that. Yeah. Or we start thinking that it's okay to have that violence inflicted on us. So it's sexual violence is definitely very, very toxic and very prevalent within our community and affecting our community. So that's what I'm seeing too. And what I'm also seeing is that a lot of youth are facing sexual violence and domestic violence too. When children face that violence and they have no one to talk to because they're already isolated, and a lot of predators do pick people who are isolated because they know that they won't talk to people. When they can't talk to people about it, then they internalize it, right? And then they become suicidal. Then they run away and they become part of that 40% of homeless youth who are LGBTQIA. Yep. They do self-harm. They fail grades. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to be active. And so they become even more isolated and become, like I said, suicidal. So on top of that, when we have children, when a lot of LGBTQIA people and children have faced childhood trauma, that then also correlates, or not correlates, but evolves and grows later in life to affect our physical health even too. And I've seen statistics that show that when children face sexual violence, domestic violence, or even living with a family member who is suicidal, who feel isolated, who see family members that don't get along, that's all trauma-based. And that leads to higher cancer rates, higher heart rates, and heart illness rates. It leads to a higher potential and possibility of being in domestic violence and sexually violent relationships. Yep. It leads to a lot of other physical and social repercussions. So it's so important that we do this work and that we educate our community on what it means to be LGBTQIA, to help people get connected to resources and have someone to talk to. But then also to be there when they do face that violence and go through that process with them and show them that they are not alone. I think that the biggest thing that people think is that if you are LGBTQIA, that you are alone and that you will have no one to talk to. Yeah. So it's our jobs, you and me and the people that are working here, to be visible, to be out, and to show people that they aren't alone and that we even have experienced the same things that they have too.
Well, another piece of this too that is something that I truly advocate is, let's just say that for the most part, kids can make it through this without the whole stigma, suicide stuff finally just taking them completely out of the picture. To your point about the future health, another thing that can typically happen is they finally just surrender and say, okay, I'm going to hide my sexual truth. I'm going to hide my gender identity. I'm going to play by the cisgender rules. I'm going to be in the binary. And then they go to live a life that isn't truly who they are. And that ends up being something that brings the health problems on too. It's that piece of you're hiding and carrying stuff. And people say to me all the time, really, are there still people who are getting married today because, they know they're gay or whatever, and they're still getting married? I'm like, yes. What is it that you can't see in our world and in our politics and everything that's saying this is still not acceptable when we still are having conversations about, even though, quote, gay marriage is now legal in 50 states and states are still fighting, trying to put rules around it and everything. This is why people will still go into their closet and hide and try to make best as they can, or the closet they end up going into is the one that takes them out of the planet altogether. So a little bit about Pride United. It's part of Strength United, which is at Cal State University Northridge, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so any of you that are listening that are in the LA area, I would highly encourage you to go check out the website. We'll have everything on the show notes here for this show. Also, there's a website for Addison Rose. She's a speaker. She's an educator. I would highly encourage you to get in touch with her, see if you can bring her, which I know I keep saying her, but I'm saying that so that people kind of go, okay, we're going to go there instead of saying they and them. But I want to talk about the they and them thing, because that is a really hard thing for people. They kind of like, okay, I get it, you're transgender, so now I'm going to call you her or I'm going to call you him. What is a way that people can really get comfortable with saying they and them?
Yeah, so I think that people think that they and them is a plural pronoun all the time, right? That you can only use it when you're talking about a group of people. But the truth is that they, them has also been used as a singular pronoun since, I think I want to say for maybe the last 300, 400 years. People just don't know this because we're not taught this in school. But I also let people know that, when you're talking, let's say someone calls you on the phone, and you don't answer the phone, someone else does. This person, yells over to you. They go, hey, this person's calling for you. What do you want me to do? You might say, oh, what do they want? Who are they? What do they want? Yep. So we're already using a they, them pronoun singularly or plurally to refer to people that we don't know whose gender identity is on the phone, right? Subconsciously use they, them as a singular pronoun, but when we become conscious of it, that's when people become resistant. Mm-hmm. So I definitely encourage people to recognize, like I said, as we're breaking this binary of man and woman and masculine and feminine and male and female and Republican and Democrat and so on and so forth, black and white, that we realize that he and she is also a binary that we need to break as well, and that we can use they, them as a singular pronoun. An example of using it would be, Addison is here on the phone today. They are a lead advocate for Pride United. Mm-hmm. Their favorite color is blue, and I was speaking with them earlier today. So that's how you use my pronouns, they, them, instead of he or she. So they, them, I'm proud of it. I love it. There's other people who use other pronouns like sie and zur, which is a gender neutral pronoun in Germany. There's so many out there. I don't want to go into too many details and overcomplicate this.
Well, we're gonna have the pronoun list up on the webpage too. So
okay, cool. Yes.
Yeah. So I love that you just went through and explained that. That was a beautiful way to do it. And for the listeners, I've actually purposely been saying her so I could make the point, because it was one of my biggest stumbling blocks when I first started speaking on panels, was to say, this is Addison Rose. They like to be referred to as Addison. They don't want to be asked questions about, do they have a dick or a vagina? They don't want to be asked what their former name is. And it was so interesting when I finally got really comfortable in that, because people would look at me and go, he's not using proper grammar. I'm like, no, I actually am. And when we think about this, it's like when you talk about, we'll bring up the Republican Democrat thing, you can be talking about their, such and such a friend. My friend is a Democrat and they like this about it. Just happens. Oh, you just used the they pronoun, and it was about a person. And I think for most of us, we don't realize we're already doing this,
Right. And even for people who feel, I would say even for people too who feel that that this is new, I just remind people too that gender too, but language is always evolving too, always changing. It's always different, and not just English, but other languages too. So it's always changing and evolving, and we need to be a part of that progress and be a part of that change too, and embrace new terms, new pronouns, new identities. I mean, there's always new identities under the LGBTQIA acronym that we can add to that acronym, and that makes our language and our community and our beings, just us as human beings, so diverse and complicated and beautiful. So I definitely encourage people to just be a part of that learning process and being part of that growth with language, and know that, you can always ask questions too if you get stuck. It's okay. It's okay not to know how to use pronouns. It's okay not to know what pronouns a person uses. Just ask. It's okay to ask for that.
And I think for me, one of the things that helped me, and then I started doing this on stage, was, and I don't get to do it that often, because usually when I do get to be on stage, I'm with other people who are either transgender or genderqueer or, the full spectrum. But when it's just me and one other person and we don't have anybody representing, what I say is, so let's talk about the genderqueer environment. There's going to be pronoun stuff you're going to hear about that they'd prefer to be called they, them, or he, her, and, all this sort of stuff. And if you have a lot of trouble with the they, them, the best way to really start understanding this is, and I'm planting the seed, I'll say that I'm planting the seed right now, is I'd like you to think about every time you say they or them for the next 24 hours. And once you use the terms they or them, look around at who you just used that on. Was it a group of people, or was it somebody individually? I can almost guarantee that a good majority of the time when you say they or them, you're going to find you're actually referring to a single person, but you just don't consciously realize you just used the they or them pronoun to refer to that one person. And it works like a charm every time I do that, because even by the end of a talk, people are like, I've had people come up and talk to me afterwards, and they're like, so, my brother was doing this and they want it. I'm like, and I just pointed at him and said, see, you just did the they. And they're like, oh yeah. And it's such a beautiful, catching way to start getting minds to change. So I just wanted to.
I love that. I love that.
It's a easy way to start to make the shift. So as we kind of wrap up everything here today, and I love what you've shared, I love your energy. I love what you're doing in the world. And again, I would just encourage anyone to reach out. If you're in the greater LA area, reach out to Pride United. Again, go to the website that we've got listed here on the show page. But reach out to Addison, anything you could use help with, especially if you're someone who is in kind of a marginalized space or you feel like you're in trouble. They're here to help you. But as we get ready to wind up here, Addison, if you could leave some bit of advice for our listeners who are struggling or trying to get through something like this, what would be the piece of advice you'd love to leave with them as we wrap up?
I think to those who are still struggling to come out or are considering coming out but are afraid, or who maybe are still in the closet and are comfortable there for now, all I can say is that you are beautiful. you are worthy, you are brilliant, and you are not alone. That being in the closet is up to you, and it's up to you to decide when you want to come out. And when you do come out, if you are afraid that your family will be unsupportive, know that there's a whole community out here that is so excited and so proud of you, and we are waiting for you to come and join us too. You are not alone, and you always have a family away from a family, and you have a home away from home. We are here for you, and we love you, and I see you, I care about you, and I'm here for you too. I also want to leave with our 24-hour hotline too. So if you are also a survivor of sexual violence and domestic violence or child maltreatment, regardless of being part of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, or asexual community, it's a long acronym, regardless of your identity, if you are a survivor, know that you can call for support as well. Our 24-hour support and referral line is 818-886-0453. Also, 661-253-0258. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. And thank you, Addison, for being a beautiful light here on the planet, and especially doing the work that you do. I know that someone will be touched by what they've heard today. And just thank you so much for being willing to go do the work you're doing and being who you are on the planet.
Thank you to you too. I really appreciate you creating these platforms and for educating so many people out there. So thank you.
You bet. All right, Closet Dwellers and Closet Busters, that's it. We're wrapping it up this week. Another episode of the Coming Out Lounge. And I just want to say thank you for always being a listener. And something that would help us really get this podcast out in the world to reach more people who could probably use this kind of support, to know that they're not alone, would be if you would be willing to go out there and give us a beautiful rating and review on whatever platform that you're listening to the podcast, be it iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you are interacting with us on the Coming Out Lounge. That would be awesome. Also, if you would share it with people, send it in a link via email. Do it from your iPhone. If you're listening to podcasts on your iPhone, there's a share button right there that you can make this happen. And the reason for that is we want to get this thing out there where more and more people can listen to it. Also, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, would like to ask a particular question to be answered on the air, please give us a ring at 949-371-8559, 949-371-8559, or email me at rick@rickclemens.com, rick@rickclemens.com, and that's Clemens, Clemons. We'd love to hear from you. Again, thank you for listening. I'm Rick Clemens, the Coming Out Coach, that guy that helps you make those big, bold moves in life to go do the thing you're meant to do. Take care, everyone, and have a great week.